This is my Oster 7-speed fusion blender. It's a reversing blender that can go into reverse in one of the pre-programmed spin cycles. The drive pin is stripped and I need to remove it and replace it. If I was going to do it again, I'd attempt it by taking a rotary tool with a cutoff wheel and cutting off the drive pin so that it left only the splay plate, which is that round disc you see in the picture. Then I'd pop the splay plate off and there'd be nothing to keep the motor from being removed from the housing once the housing was disassembled from the bottom. As you can see, I've already removed this drive stud and splay plate and a portion of the connector. If I was to attempt removing this stripped drive pin and splay plate again, and the entire connector, the portion that I'm holding in my hand and the portion that's in the housing still, I'd attempt it all with a rotary tool and a cutoff wheel. And I wouldn't fiddle around with the bottom of the blender motor once I open the case, as there's a chance of stripping the shaft or stripping the fan or the nut or whatever. In any case, I ruined the mount hole on my fan messing around with it previously. If I was going to attempt removing the drive stud again, what I would do is cut the drive stud off right just above the splay plate, and then pop off the splay plate and pull the motor out of the housing after that and attend to the drive coupler. It might be possible to drill out the drive coupler threading. It's about 0.275 inches from the top of the coupler to the bottom of the threading. So with the right diameter drill bit, you might be able to drill that out and save your coupler. This is my Oster 7-speed fusion blender with a stripped drive pin. This is my Oster 7-speed fusion blender with a stripped drive pin. This is my Oster 7-speed fusion blender with a stripped drive pin. I tried all the methods on the internet on trying to get the pin out, but it appears I'm going to have to drill it out. So first, I slotted the top of the drive spin with a cutoff wheel with my Harbor Freight rotary tool. I then tried to make a center recession by grinding the center of the top of the drive pin with a stone on my rotary tool. Then I used a 7mm crescent wrench on the flats of the drive pin and an electric drill with a 3/32 0.093 inch diameter drill bit to drill into the recession on the top of the center of the drive pin that I ground in with the rotary tool and stone bit. Next, I used a 0.166 inch diameter drill bit. It wandered off center upon reaching the top of the connector, which is evident in earlier portions of the video. I drilled into it pretty deep, not to the end of the threading of the drive pin, but it got the coupler very hot, and I used the motor and the wrench to try it unscrew it when it was in the hot state, and it broke the coupler. So anyway, the drive pin is off. The drive pin, the slinger plate, and part of the coupler is off, broken in half about, but the lower portion of the coupler is still below the housing, so I have to take the housing apart, pull the motor out, and somehow get the rest of the coupler off of the top of the motor shaft before I can do any more work on it. The housing comes apart with a long Phillips head, but all this messing about in previous disassembly and putting the fan on and off has wrecked the mating of the fan to the lower shaft, so I have to get a new fan. With the case open and the coupler broken on the top and no splay plate or pin, it's easy to pull the motor right out. It just lifts right out. Because I have to remove the motor from the PCB board so I can have better working conditions to maneuver it and take the rest of the coupler off the top of the shaft, I really have to take a picture of how the wires plug into the PCB board, because I'm going to disconnect that whole thing so I can have the motor off by itself. Here's the connector after I've been cutting on it with a cutoff wheel on my rotary tool. I put the motor in a bag to keep the dirt off of it, but it lit the bag on fire. You can see the shaft, but it still doesn't want to come off. It makes a lot of dirt, very fine like soot, cutting through the connector. And I made a bunch of cuts into the connector and tried to pry it off with a screwdriver and the vice grips, but I have to do some more cutting. Using the rotary tool and the cutoff tool, I got the connector finally cut off. I purchased the connector, splay plate, and drive pin as a package deal. I purchased a new fan and a second special new nut for the end of the drive shaft from a service center. I purchased the second nut as I thought it would help me with future drive pin replacement. The fan has a flat on one side of the drive hole, and the drive shaft has a flat for mating with the fan and driving the fan. There was also a washer when I opened up the drive pin, splay plate, and connector package. I assume the washer goes between the drive pin and the splay plate, as it doesn't fit in the recess in the bottom of the connector. I had Loctite blue 242 removable thread locker for another project that I could use for locking the new install on the threads of the blender motor drive shaft. I attempted to poke a hole in the tip of the Loctite tube with a push pin, but it ruptured the Loctite tube and it leaked all over. First, I Loctited the connector to the end of the blender motor spindle. The reason the Loctite tube probably ruptured is because I nicked it with a razor blade when opening up the package with a razor blade. Next, I installed the spacer, the fan, and the fan washer on the lower end of the drive shaft, added Loctite to the threading, and fastened the fan nut down on the lock washer while holding the connector and driving the nut with a wrench. If you are facing the top of the motor shaft, the connector goes on clockwise, and if you're facing the bottom of the motor shaft, the fan nut goes on clockwise. After reinstalling the fan, I put the blender motor back in the housing and closed up the housing so I could install the splay plate and the drive pin. Third, I mounted the drive pin by aligning the splay plate and the splay plate washer over the threaded mount hole of the top of the drive shaft, and then putting Loctite on the threads of the drive pin and threading it in to the top of the drive shaft and tightening it down with a wrench using the splay plate as the opposite leverage against the turning of the wrench. I let my blender sit for 24 hours before using it to let the Loctite cure. Remember, if you're going to use a rotary cutoff wheel, always wear safety glasses. Please be advised that anything presented in this video is solely my opinion. If a hand drill is available, all that may be needed is to purchase a small Dremel cutoff wheel to accomplish the task. This small cutoff wheel that is sold in most building supply and hardware stores in the Dremel accessories section may be the best tool suited for removal of the Oster blender metal drive pin and the drive pin connector.